I'm Linda Elsiegood, founder of the LDN Research Trust. To celebrate the MS Awareness Week 2016, it is my honour to introduce Judith from England, who uses LDN for primary progressive MS.
Thank you for joining us, Judith. So can you tell us, how did you discover you had MS?
Well, basically, I started to get chronic migraines kind of in my late 40s. I'd had hormonal migraines before then, but all of a sudden, wham, they started and they totally took over my life. And it was said that I was going through the menopause and that's why they'd got worse. But they were literally, if I wasn't going down with one, I was having one or getting over one. Literally, my life was dictated by them. And previously to that, I was a very healthy person. But for many, many years, looking back, I used to, every 2 or 3 months, have a few days when I couldn't put my finger on it. I just felt unwell, tired, weak. And I used to say to my family, oh, I've got my virus. Never really felt ill enough to go to the doctor, but it just wiped me out for a few days and then it would just go. And then looking back, because I think that's what all of us with MS do, I can remember being on holiday. I think we were in Greece somewhere. And I can remember walking and thinking, what's the matter with my foot? And looking back, that was the start, and that was actually, it must have been about 7, 8 years before I actually got my diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And just little times like that, but because I had being a nurse, I'd got a nurse's back, an arthritic back, things like that. Of course, you just blame it on that. So what happened with the migraines, I took early retirement, was always going to take early retirement at 55 from nursing, but the 2 years leading up to retirement were, looking back, I just don't know how I got through it. I was just tired, weak all the time, but I've got the letters from my headache specialist saying Mrs. Morland is suffering from weakness in her legs and fatigue related to her migraines.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I was also having problems with my bowels. I'd had a lifetime of constipation, started having extra problems, saw a gastroenterologist, and they tried to sort me out. Also saw a rheumatologist who thought the weakness in my legs was probably due to my arthritic back. And it's kind of like, this would have been the chance, really, for someone to have said, let's have an MRI and see what's going on with this lady. But, of course, it didn't happen then. And it was actually just after I'd retired, having had the most miserable year leading up to it, where I'd actually had 4 months, when I counted it up, off sick.
Wow.
And still put down to migraines. And retired early, and then all of a sudden I realised I was getting headaches rather than migraines. And I thought, wow, fantastic. And then I thought, hang on, then why do I feel worse? Why do I still feel weak and tiredness and all the rest of it? Went to a relatively new GP who literally said, right, not going to stop until we've got some answers to this. Had the first MRI. I asked for a report because the smattering of knowledge that I'd got, I knew I'd kind of understand what I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was reading, I knew I hadn't got what it said, which was possible spinal stroke or transverse myelitis. And I thought, I've got MS. I'd already spoken to my family beforehand saying, I thought there was a chance I might have it. And they said, oh, don't be silly, wait for your MRIs. But I kind of knew.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that was, instead of shock, this was before the diagnosis, Actually, it was relief, Linda. I thought, yeah, I've got to have my next 2 MRIs, etc. I also realised I'd had no relapses, so I knew it was going to be primary progressive. So basically, I had to have the next 2, and the last one, I think the next one said possible demyelination, and it said white focal points and things, and I thought, right, here we go. It's coming, and the last one was probable, and I knew the language that they use, possible, probable. In other words, the radiologist can't say it is, but the probable means it is. So I ended up going to the neurologist, kind of walking in saying, knowing I was going for my diagnosis, saying, I know I've got MS, I know it's primary progressive, I just want to walk out of this door with you having confirmed that, and I also know you can't give me anything. And I don't think he'd probably had a lot of patients like me. I remember him kind of looking up at me with a shocked face, and after a few seconds saying, well, yes, you are right, you have got MS, and yes, it is primary progressive. And that was it, really. And yes, for me, it was relief because I'd had this miserable, by then, 3 years. I was walking with a stick by then, and people would say, oh, is your back playing up again? You know, what have you done to your leg? Knowing that it wasn't that. And for me, it was relief. I knew what it was, so I could now almost be allowed to be disabled with a reason. But I also knew that now I could enter into the MS world, if that made sense.
Yes.
And what I had been doing over the 9 months was researching. And I'd already found LDN in my research. And because I'm allergic to a host of antibiotics, intolerant to loads of drugs, and when I read about LDN, I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be for me. So I was diagnosed in the October and started taking it in the February. I didn't consult any doctors or neurologists because obviously the research I knew, number one, my GP wasn't going to be able to prescribe it, and I knew that my neurologist thought I'd already heard, he thought people were crazy that were on LDN. So I thought, okay, well, the time will come and I'll tell him. So started to take it, and a few weeks later, good relationship with my GP, so I thought I'll go and tell him. And I can remember saying, oh, have you heard of LDN? He kind of said, yes, I believe I have done. You know, why are you asking? I said, because I've been on it for a month. He said, oh, right, this is a choice you're making? I said, yes, it definitely is, and explained that I'd found it in my research. And on your website, I'd seen that it suggested that we offer GPs information. So I downloaded that information pack, and I said to him, I've actually downloaded some information. I don't know if you'd like to see it. And his words were, Mrs. Mullard, I'd be so interested. We've actually got several patients at the surgery with MS.
Oh.
And I gave it to him. Now, the interesting thing is, I didn't know then, but one of their practice nurses has got relapsing remitting. Plus, he also said to me, we're hoping to set up a support group for our patients with MS. And that started. It is the only surgery in the area with a support group. I'm actually going to the surgery tomorrow. We meet up socially, but tomorrow we're there with the GP and anybody with MS from the surgery who wants to go. And guess what, Linda? Tomorrow I'm giving a talk of my experience of taking LDN.
Oh, wow.
And I am taking the new book.
Oh, double wow.
And I'd like to kind of force feed it to the GP, but I'm quietly confident that he might be interested in it, and I'm going to offer it to him to loan. Mm-hmm. So, in a brief nutshell, that's my experience, but I want to tell you what I have felt since I've taken it. Is this the time to tell you that?
Yes, it is, yes.
Okay. So I only took it with one goal, to slow my progression. I wasn't expecting anything else at all. But I remember a few months after taking it, a little group of people with MS that we meet up with coffee, somebody said to me, Judith, you're walking quicker. I said, am I? Yeah. She said, I've been watching you each time we meet. You're walking quicker. What's that drug you're taking? And I sat down and told her about it, and she is on it. And in fact, within the group of people that I've met in the past year, there's 4 and a 5th that I met last week. I point them in the direction of Up the Creek with a Paddle.
Mm-hmm.
And they read that, and I give them the website to read as well. And literally number 5 is going to be taking it. The other thing, I remember meeting my brother, and afterwards he said, God, you said you haven't been like this for a long, long time. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm trying to put my finger on it. He said, you're just more alert. And I thought to myself, that is exactly what I had been feeling. Plus, energy in a different way. I was waking in the morning beforehand and kind of like dragging myself out of bed. And what I was aware of is that I was getting up and I just had far more energy. I just used to, before LDN, get up. It was almost as if my body had to readjust to being upright rather than lying in bed, and I'd just have to kind of sit for a couple of hours before I did anything. Totally, I can't remember the last time that happened. And because of the energy, what I was also able to do was to exercise more. And what I realised was how much my muscles had weakened over the previous few years. And I now do Pilates and use a hydrotherapy pool. And, well, I'm still walking with a stick. And I'm aware, I am aware in the past few months that it's kind of gone down slightly. But I'm not bothered by that because I just feel that we've had things like a lofting conversion done. And that takes over your life. And it wasn't great. So I'm at the moment getting back to where I was. But yes, I know I am a positive thinking person. But, and some people have kind of sort of said, you know, is this placebo effect? I'm a huge believer in the placebo effect, but I know this may be a part of it. And bring it on. I couldn't care less if it is, but I know it's not in entirety. And I feel that I just want to stand and ring a bell and tell everybody with MS about LDN. And because I work as a volunteer support worker locally for the MS Society, I'm in quite a good role for that because I kind of meet people, and I soon meet, I know by talking with them, the sort of people who I know they're not going to want to know. They've kind of like, it's MS and that's it. And I feel sad for them, but at the same time, I'm not going to bore them with something that I know they're going to kind of say, I'm not interested in that, and that sounds like snake oil or something like that. But it's the people who I immediately pick up on that they're interested, you know, what's out there. And they're the people who I just kind of casually say, oh, you know, what are you on? And we have that conversation. And I say, oh, I take LDN. And they say, invariably, what's that? And that is when I tell them. I've got some people who are frustrated. One who is actually very angry. She's had MS for years, and she's also, on top of it, got a Crohn's type illness as well. But hey-ho, she started LDN a few months ago, and she is already those tiny little subtle signs, and I'm so thrilled for her. And I'm also, anybody I meet who hasn't, in the MS world, but knows of someone with Parkinson's or some cancers. I've got a friend of my husband's at the moment who's just being treated for lung cancer. He's only recently had surgery, and I'm just waiting for him to kind of recover from that before I have a tentative conversation with him about LDN. And I'm really, really hoping that he'll take it. So I'm trying to think of anything else to tell you.
How long have you been taking LDN, Judith?
It was 2 years in February.
Mm-hmm.
2 years in February, yeah. So I'm on it for life, Linda. I would never stop taking it.
Could I just ask about headaches? Have you had headaches since you've been on LDN?
Oh, hardly ever. Forgot to say that. Hardly ever. And now I just take aspirin for them, whereas when I was going through the hellish years, I was on strong, what are called triptans, it was kind of like shall I put up with the pain or the side effects of the triptans? And unfortunately, getting rid of the pain always won, so you were then battling with the side effects of the medication. I lived on them. Well, no, I didn't live on them, but they were just, I never left home without them.
Yes.
Never left home without them. And no, I can't believe the lack of headaches that I have. And I've also got arthritis in various joints. No, not bad, but I really feel that has been dampened down as well.
Well, what an amazing lady you are. And isn't it fantastic that people that have the benefits like I have and like you have, that we then want to help other people and share that knowledge? Yes,
I have this huge evangelical part of me that wants to share it, Linda. And as I said, five already, and I'm going to carry on, definitely. I also go to an MS therapy centre, which is kind of like about 45 minutes away, and the manager there knows that I'm on it and is always asking me about it. I have she's just had the new book. I lent it to her for a week, and she just said, Judith, every doctor's got to know about this, haven't they? And I said, well, they can't. If they read that book, there's going to be a lot of doctors, especially neurologists. I'd like to say the neurologists who I was initially under, who I knew thought we were crazy. In my last consultation with him, he didn't know it was the last one, but I had no intention of staying with him. I kind of force-fed him with how I'm managing my MS. I had hyperbaric oxygen as well. And he just had to sit there and listen because I gave him no choice. And I just wonder, because I know it's going to come out, and neurologists will have to, I think, have a way of saying to their patients, actually, there are other choices, especially as primary progressive, where there is nothing. And people I meet with primary progressive, for some of them, especially when they're told, I'm very sorry, there's nothing for you, that is horrendous for them. Absolutely horrendous, because there is. And to me, I've had periods where I've felt so angry. But the trouble is, I also totally understand why there isn't going to be, because of course there is no pharmaceutical financial reward. And I kind of try and find a way of explaining that to people simply, So, that's how it is really, Linda.
Absolutely amazing, and thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Thank you.